Spoiler warning, this video contains spoilers for the Judgment duology, which includes the Kaito Files. You've officially been warned, so you can theoretically blame me, but not within reason, I don't think. Two videos on Lost Judgment in a row. I don't think I could make my thoughts on the game more obvious if I outright said what they were. I will anyway, though. This is the best Yakuza game, and Snowiest was 100% correct. I don't think it's an unpopular opinion to say that Lost Judgment is the best game in the series, even if it's not my personal favorite. And one aspect that helps boost its status, you know, if you ignore the phenomenal gameplay, beautiful visuals, and genuinely god-tier soundtrack that makes me go apeshit, is its characters. We have enjoyable side characters that were introduced, like Sawa, whose presence single-handedly justifies Yagumi's crusade in the finale, Watanabe, who was a touch forgettable but was still an enjoyable doofus, and the legendary Tesso, who he calls Sugiura Brownie Locks in the Japanese dub. It doesn't really get much better than that. But aside from the enjoyable side characters and supporting cast this game introduces or changes from the previous entry, there was also the phenomenal selection of villains as well. In my video dissecting Viper and what I liked about it, I covered Soma, the classic unforgivable ruthless villain, but there's a lot more villains that I think deserve credit. There's Bondo, who I think was more intimidating in concept than in execution, but still ended up being pretty enjoyable. Ehara, a surprisingly dynamic character despite being locked in jail for the entire game. Akutsu, this game's equivalent to someone like Kuze or Yamai, albeit not as personally effective. And of course, Jin Kuwana, the best Yakuza villain. Like, it's not even close. Lost Judgment gave me a great array of characters to chew on. But right when I thought it was over, the Kaito Files showed up and gave me a dessert that would make Gordon Ramsay cry tears of joy. In terms of content in the Judgment duology, I think the Kaito Files is the weakest overall, but that's like saying this caviar isn't quite as good as it could be. When it came to characters to do analyses on, there were 5 main candidates that came to my mind. First was Jun, who plays a surprisingly enjoyable sidekick role in this adventure that I wasn't really banking on, because I was waiting for him to turn into that annoying kid character that the protagonist has to drag around the entire time. Instead, what I got was refreshing and emotional, and also not my subject for discussion. Then there was Jun's mom, Mikiko, who once again developed surprisingly well in spite of what I thought was going to happen. Where I thought she was going to turn into great value brand Sayama, we ended up getting a surprisingly capable femme fatale among the likes of Sonhee. She was not who I wanted to talk about. Branching off of these two, we've got the patriarch of the Sadamoto family, Kyoya. Some people call him a lesser Soma from the main game, but I honestly liked what little we got of Kyoya's insanity and psychopathy. And then there's Shirakawa, who's there, I guess. Look, I love this finale and this fight, but can we just admit that this was incredibly stupid? In the greatest way possible, but this was stupid. As you probably pieced together from the thumbnail, or just through process of elimination, because who else would I even talk about? Today, I wanted to talk about who I believe to be the most underrated villain in the entirety of the Yakuza series. The legendary user of the Drunken lamppost technique, Crimson Lotus frontman himself, Shusuke Kenmochi. Let's talk about him. So why do I think Kenmochi is the most underrated Yakuza villain? Well, to put it simply, he gets 3 major scenes in the game, and his perception drastically transforms between each one. He goes from some random drunken, brutish punk with a hard-on for pain, to a sympathetic, albeit hateable victim of someone else's plot, to the one who finally gets the drop on the main villain as the true consequences of that villain's actions rear their ugly heads. The order in which I reveal and talk about things relating to this character are kind of paramount to making him work in the same way for you as he did for me, so I'll try and limit myself to explaining his history relative to what Kaito and the player know at the given points in the story that I'm talking about. That being said, holy shit! Firstly, let's talk about his fairly unique design, something that probably stood out to a lot of people on their first playthrough. With Akutsu being the only exception to my point, we've never had a character design like Kenmochi, which makes sense because we've never really had a character like him either. If there's one thing this series is good at, it's conveying a character's personality solely through the clothes they wear. If you want proof of this, look no further than Majima before and after the events of Yakuza 0, where he transforms from a tortured soul trying to make the best out of a horrible situation into a completely unpredictable, maniacal, violent crime lord. Point being, when you look at this guy, what does he scream? I'll tell you what he looks like to me. A douchey, ignorant frat boy with no sympathy, which is precisely what we get. The loose-fitting clothes, the chain, the barely hidden tribal tattoo, and that annoying haircut all scream, I am not one to be taken seriously. Thankfully, it's not long into his introduction where we learn he's more than that, actually. He's also an alcoholic. Yay! Speaking of which, let's discuss his introductory scene. After Kaito is ambushed by members of a gang called Crimson Lotus, he beats them up because he's Masaharu Kaito, the most man in any man that ever manned. And right as the tides of battle settle, up stumbles Kenmochi, the front man of the men you just took out, drinking a bottle of liquor and boasting how it's high time he and Kaito throw down, something his men have apparently been looking forward to. We learn why fairly quickly when, while in the midst of hyping his men up, he walks over to a lamppost and does this.
Jesus Christ!
In the history of Yakuza, and more specifically Judgment, I don't think there's been a better immediate strength-defining moment than Kenmochi drunkenly pulling a f***ing lamppost from out of the ground and using it as a sledgehammer during his fight with Kaito. So, Kenmochi, the loud, brash drunk who has enough strength to pull up a lamppost. Time to get into the thing I do best and talk about his theme music. Now, because the Kaito Files doesn't have an official OST release, this track doesn't really have a name, so I'm gonna go with what it's called on the wiki and call this song Bottling Spirit. As you'd expect for a theme for a character like this, it's loud, brash, and pulsating. To complement these massive swings, or swigs, Kenmochi takes, are these hard synth hits that drown out almost every other instrument in the process, with very brief moments of genuine lucidity to pierce through what is otherwise a very aggressive and unforgiving melody. Par for the course for good old Kenmochi, right? Well, we need to flip the coin here, because as it goes with the best villains in this series, there's more than meets the eye to this guy. So to do that, we need to start exploring his second encounter, delving into what I alluded to in the thumbnail, and to answer the question, how exactly does guilt drown you alive? To answer my previous question, we need to dive into Kenmochi's backstory, and figure out how exactly he ended up at this point. As I mentioned, Kenmochi is the frontman for a group called Crimson Lotus, which is a pretty tight-knit, small-time crime syndicate with no real sense of hierarchy. To be honest, it's tough to even call these guys criminals. I mean, yeah, they do bad things as we'll come to find out, but for the most part, it's honestly just a group of friends that like hanging out together, and sometimes they commit crimes. Hell, according to Kenmochi, they don't even carry ill will to those who want out of Crimson Lotus, and this can be traced back to its origin. These guys just started out as an event club in college called Rijome. Remember that whole thing where I called Kenmochi a douchey frat boy? Yeah, that's because he literally is one. As an event club, Rijome wasn't exactly the best with funds, whether it be generating or saving them. The logical solution fell into their lap when Kyoya Sadamoto joined them, serving as their financial advisor and the one who egged them on to pursue more illegal activities, which is where Crimson Lotus truly began. Eventually, Kyoya and Kenmochi came across this fairly lucrative land deal, wherein Kyoya started his master plan. He married into the family of the people that own the house, at which point he had Kenmochi burn the house down so they could collectively profit off the insurance money. And with that, we can continue talking about Kenmochi's second fight. See, the reason Kaito gets so involved with this plot in the first place is because, for some reason, at least to us right now, his ex-girlfriend seems to be killing members of Crimson Lotus. So as she tracks Crimson Lotus down to a hotel, they manage to get the drop on her and hold her hostage, leaving Kaito room to intervene. He steps in and beats everyone up, trying to get his ex's whereabouts, until finally stumbling upon her, unconscious in bed with a partially undone blouse, hands tied up, being watched over by a mostly naked Kenmochi, who taunts Kaito for his failure to protect her. Kaito, not wanting to be outmanned, I guess, throws a massive table at Kenmochi, who catches it like it's no big deal and yucks it right back at Kaito like a baseball, leading to the start to their next encounter. And after Kaito wins, inevitably, and we get this epic shot, we start to get the whole picture on Kenmochi's character. After the fight, he gets back up and starts drinking even more before kneeling over and crying? Not vomiting from the alcohol, not out of a sense of pain, but because he's crying. And once Kenmochi starts talking aloud, the picture zooms out and we learn what really happened. See, I neglected to mention a key detail earlier. When I said Kenmochi burned down a house to profit from the shared insurance money from Kyoya, I didn't mention that there were 3 people inside who all unfortunately perished in the flames. This not only explains why Mikiko is going around killing members of Crimson Lotus, because it's her way of getting revenge, but it also explains why when Kenmochi looks back up, he sees the ghosts of the people he's killed. And it's here he starts genuinely begging Kaito to keep hitting him, because being in physical pain is a preferable alternative to the pain he's going through in his head. This moment recontextualized everything about this character to me. He's not just some alcoholic frat boy, he's a man stricken with grief over something he had no control over. And how does he deal with this? By constantly drinking. Looking back, every time Kaito lays off the punches, Kenmochi starts to drink. Not because he's powering up or anything, but because the physical pain is subsiding, and he needs a way to help deal with the inevitable pain that comes with his grief. He keeps flashing back to the gruesome times when he was a prize fighter, because it is again a preferable alternative to the other memories he has. And even then, he fought to bury that pain under something more tangible. But alas, it didn't last. And the worst part? It's not a pain he can talk about. He's Shusuke Kenmochi, frontman of Crimson Lotus, dammit. If he's not their shining beacon of masculinity and perseverance, no one will be. So he keeps the demeanor up, silently suffering behind the alcohol and physical pain he insists on enduring. Look back on his theme with me. Where once stood loud, jarring hits befitting an alcoholic strongman that only occasionally allows for brief moments of genuine lucidity, now stands a song that drowns out its darker and repressed undertones through painful, more literal hits that protects what Kenmochi really feels. That being this melancholic and crushing regret over the reality of what he's done, no matter how much he wants to drown it out. That, my friends, is how guilt drowns you alive. But he's not quite done yet, because we've still got one major scene to look over. While attending the yearly meeting of Crimson Lotus, a whole host of shenanigans goes down as Kyoya, the aforementioned financial whiz responsible for bringing Rijome to fruition, plans to kill the remaining leaders of Crimson Lotus to hide the dark truth. The arson, the murders therein, his criminal ties, and even his marriage was all a plan to monetarily thrive, leaving everyone else in the dust as he plans to ultimately blame his wife for the murders of the remaining members of Crimson Lotus so he can get away with everything scot-free. The way he goes about this is by using a slow-acting poison in the wine at the event, so everyone gets poisoned without knowing until it's too late. Now, can we think of a character who would inevitably drink alcohol that would succumb to this poison? While negotiating with Kaito and Mikiko on the rooftop, who shows up but Kenmochi, just in time to learn the truth. The 3 arson murders Kenmochi thought were all his fault were actually planned by Kyoya. And before he gets a chance to react to this in a meaningful way, the slow-acting poison in the wine finally kicks in and... Wait, Kenmochi dies? I swear, I thought there was more than this. Right, sorry, I forgot about what happened next. See, because he now has an answer to the question he didn't even know he had, Kenmochi isn't exactly willing to die just yet. After Kaito beats Kyoya into submission and Mikiko refuses to put a bullet into her husband's head, especially in front of their kid, Kenmochi decides to take the situation into his own hands. Literally. And I can't do the scene better justice than the scene itself does, so let me just show it to you.
Not the Yakuza! Not
This kill and this moment meant everything to me when I first saw it. As far as I'm concerned, all we needed after this was Kaito and Jun's heart-to-heart on the hospital roof, because I could not imagine a better conclusion for a character as nuanced and repressed as Kenmochi. A man haunted by the lives of those he never wanted to take, choosing to voluntarily take the life of the man who made him the shell he is today in the most gruesome way possible. It wasn't Mikiko that got her revenge. It was Kenmochi, the earliest victim of Kyoya's schemes, clinging to life for the last time to show what the consequences of Kyoya's actions really were. This guy is layers upon layers of nuance, all wrapped up nicely into a frat boy with a stupid haircut and tribal tattoos. Characters haunted by their past are plentiful. We know that for certain. It's the way that they present themselves that matters. And to me, none put on that faded smile of regression while trying to move forward in a life that refuses to let them move on better than Shusuke Kenmochi.